All right, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. We thank Allah. We thank Allah for this beautiful religion. And I thank Allah for joining me among this beautiful group of believers in this community, this Islamic Muslim community. I'm only a part of the product of this community. There's nothing unique about me at all. I tell you that. I, I think she mentioned I had a audio problem, but I think Dr. Gloria mentioned that I became a member of the Nation of Islam in 1969. She may have mentioned that early part of my history. The reason why I need to reference that is because basically the whole focus of this research and this issue about Islamic personality and Islamic psychology, or the psychic makeup of the believer from an Islamic perspective, begins with my coming into Islam, of course, in terms of my personal development. But 1969 is when I did become a member of the Nation of Islam. The reason why I want to reference that is because a good friend of mine who I met then, we were speaking just the other day, and he made the comment that he said, I knew this brother in 1969, and he is the same as he was then. He's exactly the same as he was then. And that's good for me to know it, because I can already know that from a person outside of myself who can observe. Why am I referencing that? Because that is maybe an accurate portrayal report, but because it speaks to the topic that we're talking about, personality. And it's common for people to think of ourselves when the idea, concept of personality, our personalities, other people's personalities, in that way, very common way, right? But that's not where we're going with the concept of personality. When it comes to research and the study of personality, even in just even a secular sense, but more so in an Islamic sense, there are some very detailed definitions, these aspects of the human personality that Islam is particularly concerned with. And as believers, we're encouraged to learn and to understand. And we do that. We're doing that all the time. Every aspect of our Islamic life contributes to this deeper view of personality. I say a deeper view because in Islam, in the Quran, the term for the soul, as we mentioned before, is the same word that's used for the soul, which is nefs. The nefs. This is a person. This is the true person. This is where we're really born. Where the spiritual aspect of our life and the mental aspect of our life are combined, or they come together. They exist together. They influence each other, and they're very important factors of our soul, especially when we're speaking of ourselves as coming into the guidance of Allah. So this is the question was, what is the Islamic view? But that's only one question we could ask, isn't it? What is the Islamic view of human personality? And that would be addressed or be viewed or researched in terms of as individual or as a body, a collective body, right? Individually, we have a human personality. Collectively, we have a human personality, a group personality. And obviously, they're very much related. But it's just a question to make us think and for research purposes. And hopefully we will see this as a study or research of the idea of Islamic personality. We can also ask the question, when does this personality begin in the human being, an individual human being, right? Male or female. When the personality actually started to form? Of course, I'm sure there's much discussion on that, much technical, academic, intellectual research and discussion can be had on that. But from a very simple Quranic perspective, though the language is very simple, but speaks to this very profound aspect of the human being. And Allah tells us that the paradise, this is in the saying of the Prophet, prayers and peace be upon him, So this comes from the hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he said, paradise lies at the feet of the mother. Paradise lies at the feet of the mother. And I'm sure that's not only a representation of the human development as from the baby, from the child, gaining all the influence from his mother, weaning aspects of his personality be started to form. We could say that that is one of those beginnings. And I'm sure there's some research on the personality beginning even before we're born in the womb. Where we know, we've learned that the one faculty that begins before birth is hearing. So it could be possible, right? But that would be speculation in some way of understanding what deeper studies may take us into understanding if our personalities do begin in the womb. There may be some genetic influence that influence our personality that we find. I say this is a research on a particular issue, a particular subject matter, using specific sources or materials. On the previous Talim, there was this interest, as we discussed, interest in books, recommended books, a listing of books that as we cultivate ourselves, I guess that's in cultivating the personality as well as cultivating our psychology through knowledge, through education. So this subject matter is using certain sources, and one of them particularly that I would recommend is called Self-Knowledge and Spiritual Yearning. And sources for Islamic knowledge in general, that's number one. Number two of the consideration in this approach in the discussion, sources for Islamic knowledge. And secondly, how our psyche, or our psychology of ourselves, personality and all, is influenced by Islam. It's really what we're saying when we're looking for Islamic sources. We're really trying to adapt ourselves as Islam wants us to adapt to guidance, to the guidance of Allah. As the book I mentioned, Self-Knowledge, we'll be looking at sources from that. I know our time will be shortened, so we'll have to abbreviate. But this particular book, if you're interested in studying this subject matter of the self, and some people can be very interested in psychology studies, psychology, philosophy, personality development. But as I mentioned, personality in Islamic thought is not like the personality when we talk about our characteristics, behavioral patterns necessarily, pleasantness, rudeness, hastiness, all those external characteristics that we have of a person. It's talking about really a deeper level of the person. The word is shakhsiyatul baris. Shakhsiyatu is the Arabic word for personality. And it's speaking about, is referring to that grows out of us. It grows out of us. So it's really a life of the person that is constantly forming or unfolding. The other source, if you're interested, is a work entitled Psychology of Personality. The Psychology of Personality, Islamic Perspectives. And this work is a collection of writers, over 14 contributors to this subject, Psychology of Personality, and is edited by Amber Hawk and Yassine Muhammad. So Amber Hawk, in this particular source, the Psychology of the Personality, he gives a definition. He begins a definition as an introduction of personality. Psychology of personality, I'm speaking about in our personal circumstances, not as individuals, but as a group, a social group. The psychology of the group, the personality of the group is what we are mostly interested in, right? So the definition about the person that Amber Hawk was providing for us is crucial to understanding of human beings. Now, when I reflect, as I said, an individual who I know from 1969, we encountered the same introduction to Islam through the teachings of the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam affected our psyche. It affected our psychology. So when we're talking about psychology or understanding psychology, we're trying to understand ourselves. And this is what Islam does. This is what it did for us. This is how Farad Muhammad, on him be peace, right? God forgive his sins and grant him paradise. He thought Islam was a cure for our psychic state, as a psychological formula, even though he took liberties, and that's what you do with a person that may be disabled, right? A person that may be socially, I think maybe we could say socially handicapped, was his approach to addressing our deficiencies that had come from many different areas, but one was from religion, and Honorable Elijah Muhammad recognized that, and Honorable Elijah Muhammad celebrated that, and he picked that view up to correct our social problems through a new religious idea, So the conference really showed the model examples, products of this formula for bringing African Americans to not from the 30s mentality of the 30s, the mentality of the 60s, the mentalities on up until this new millennium, that we were able to see examples of how Islam has been processed into our lives. And now we have the religion within our own hands. And that's why I encourage us to grow in Islamic knowledge. And that's why I think we should accept the challenge to understand how Islam addresses our life, what are the science of Islamic knowledge of Islam, the science of Islam, as it reforms us in humanity and advances or evolves us up a higher level of human development. There was an image of Imam Muhammad when he first began his leadership, using his hands to point to his mind. And the focus he was a symbol of his, indicating to us that this is not just an emotional or spiritual journey, but it's one that involves that we engage it through our intellect. So psychology really became of interest to me from his leadership and his direction, his combining of the Quran, the religion of Islam, religion itself, the teachings of religion itself, but also how it's to be applied in real human circumstances. And of course, we need to begin with our own. The other book, that a source that I think offers something to help us really understand psychology. Well, I'm talking about the applied psychology and applied to our circumstances first. How we help ourselves to think or encourage or direct ourselves to think a certain way. If we're people who are trying to renew our lives, then we need to, of course, all of us understand that. Our thinking is crucial, right? Think about ourselves. And so the belief or the oneness of God has helped us to center us and to anchor us into the real basic criteria for understanding ourselves. This is what the teachings of Islam do. We understand when we talk about defining ourselves or understanding our own selves, our own thinking, as a being and as an individual being, right? That it's in relationship to a creator, to our creator. This is really the basic fundamental teachings or the basis for a healthy psychology in Islam. And the Quran is replete with these references to the conscious person and their relationship with God. Amber Hawk also brings into light, now he's one of the modern scholars of psychology. I'm trying to get to the history of this study. So that we don't think that this is just an academic issue. It's not. It's also a very important Islamic historical history of Islamic and intellectual history and heritage of Islam, which I don't think we have enough of. We don't know enough. I wish we were in person and we could take a poll. And I think if we would take a poll and I would say, how many on this call, let's see, how many is on this call? 21 people on this call. So you can answer it yourself and just where you are. Aware, familiar with the name Khalid bin Walid. Out of 21 people, if you don't have any, I mean, really wish we could take the poll because it reveals something. I think there would be maybe a majority, maybe 50%, but I suspect maybe a majority. I could be wrong, but I'm sure I know many who know the name Khalid bin Walid, historical figure. Now, I think to be the majority, but if we were to ask how many people are familiar with the name of one of the early Islamic scholars, it probably wouldn't be as familiar. We might not have significant, maybe there would be some. For example, if we were to say of the El-Kindi, how many have heard the term El-Kindi? Maybe some have. Of course, it's going to be more common in that academic setting. But my point is that there are certain figures of Islam that I think has been presented in the Western society to give the wrong view of Islam, to introduce Islam as a militant force, right? A force of dominance, right? Of course, a very coarse, not a sophisticated ideology, more of just a power struggle, right? Is interested in power, takeover. So there's misrepresentations of Islam in the West. We know that has been the case. But I mentioned El-Kindi in contrast with maybe someone like Khalid bin Walid, or maybe some modern day right oppressors unfortunately that there may be in Islam, more so than the intellectual heritage of Islam. El-Kindi is one who wrote more than 239 titles, including books and short treatises on psychology, on sleep and dreams, right? The first philosophy, Kindi, sorrow, spiritual nefsani, is speaking of the spiritual person, the nature of the spiritual person. And this was like in 800s, the 9th century. So you see my point that I'm trying to draw, the view that I'm trying to show is that in the 9th century, there were Muslim scholars studying these very sophisticated sciences, but reflecting on the makeup, the nature of the human person, human thinking, the psychological makeup and behavior. And this is what, 500 years before the Renaissance, before Europe came into any sense of what it prides itself in modern thought or progressive life. But there are many, many, many more of these. We have a whole heritage of these scholars studying the idea of psychology. The term personality is a recent term in the 20th century in Western thought. So we're looking at how Islam, can't see the time right now, so someone will have to remind me of the time that we were. So I want to see, it's 1:40.
You can keep going, Imam Rabanni. We did start late, so I think we could go a little bit longer.
It addresses the levels of self-knowledge, as the title implies, but it speaks about it in terms of the dark side or the darkness within us that can occur within us. Nafs al-Amara. Imam Tariq mentioned this referred to this aspect of the soul in the Jummah, in the Khutbah Jummah of Surah Yusuf, and was speaking about the state of Yusuf's soul at the time. And he speaks about his
We've lost you again, Imam Rabanni. Imam Rabanni? I think Imam Rabbani's phone must have dropped. Okay. All right, he's back.
You still good?
Yeah, you dropped out for
You
did drop out. But yeah, we're back.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll start to summarize and conclude since we are having some technical difficulties. But the foundation of the psyche, which is the word that is used even in the English dictionary. If we look up soul, it say psyche. Arabic dictionary will say the same thing: finesse, soul, and psyche. So obviously, our thinking is an aspect of our soul. Our soul registers. Our soul measures and registers our behavior. It registers our relationship. It's like a barometer, a conscious, continuous running barometer. And Allah is telling us that He has breathed of His breath, His spirit into us, and we become a living soul. So that's something that has to be taken very serious when we think Islamically about our own psyche or our own spiritual makeup. And so that when Muslims say in these sources and in the study by Islamically from Islamic sources or from an Islamic perspective, we're thinking about our relationship with Allah. And that is really the core of our souls. And the Quran is replete with these examples throughout history of individuals and how they lost, how they failed because of the neglecting the needs of the soul. So as I conclude, the formula for success that was introduced into our association, our Islamic Muslim Association, beginning with Farad Muhammad, was a formula to what he referred to as oil or a solution for what he called rusty locks. So it's the state of mind that Islam cured, it unlocked, it caused us to, helped us to see ourselves completely differently. And we are doing that now. And I see among African-American Muslims in particular, in terms of this view or questioning of our psychological state, the health of our psychological or lack thereof, there are those who are identifying Islam differently. We have the Nation of Islam, they identify in Islam, but they have a little different shape to their belief system. We have Muslims from other than the Nation of Islam, other than the community of Imam W. Muhammad, other from more identified with other communities outside. But as African Americans, I think we have to trust that we have a psyche that Islam cures or redirects us. And I believe if we continue on this path with Islam as a psychological solution, that conditions our thinking, eventually we will have to all end up really with the same psychological, even though we have different personalities, religious personalities, psychologically, we still have the same need. We still have the need to know ourselves in God's creation, and as God's created us, and as God is guiding us. So as I close, I'll close with the verse of the Quran, where Allah says, "I have not created the jinns or the humans for any purpose other than worshiping me." Now I want to close with this. It is on this foundation that all the approaches to the study of our personality are related to, on the fact that Allah has created us for His purpose. So however we manifest in our persons, within our own being, psychologically or through our personality, through our morality, our spirituality, or our intellectuality, actually, intelligence, then it is related to this purpose that Allah has created within us. So I would thank you all. I'm sure we are out of close to the end of our time, considering the circumstances. So I apologize for the interruptions and for the inconsistency in the signaling, but inshallah, Allah is the best knower. So thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Imam Rabanni, and I need you to hold on to your notes because we're going to have to revisit this. So we're opening the floor. We still got a few minutes if we have folks who want to make some comments or have some questions. I found I thought the presentation, again, you know, we apologize for the disruptions, but that the concept of the Islamic view, the Islamic perspective of personality is very intriguing. Questions or comments?
This is Bashir. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu
alaikum.
I came on late, but very beneficial. I would think too that this is a good this talk, this lecture that was given to us, and a very scholarly lecture, would be an impetus for us to join Brother Rabanni's class. But I'd like to make a comment, you know, that this area of person too was a focus too in the period of time, or if we look at Master Farad Muhammad and what he was bringing to us at that time, our person, who we were as a person. And Imam Muhammad said that was his focus also, the psychology aspect. His focus was more on psychology than any other aspect of our religion. So I'll leave it there. And thank you very much for what you've given us today. Assalamu
alaikum. You know, there's one, can I make another comment, observation?
Yes. Yes.
Before we, even before Islam, before we came to Islam, maybe in the church, I guess, for those of my age and for my generation, we came up in the church. And I'm not saying anything negative about the church. I'm just saying that was our original environment. That was our first womb, our relationship to religion or spirituality. But one of the things that we were happy to leave from that period was this notion of original sin. When Islam came to us, we saw this was, we welcomed Islam because it denied that assertion that human beings had an original sin. So this is another reason why Islam is a shifa, a healing for these lies on the human being and these lies against God, these lies of falsehoods against the prophets of God, and so forth and so on. Religion was made so confusing for us that we needed it to be reconciled, and Islam is reconciled by taking us to that origin. So I'm sure Farad Muhammad, he said, I'm taking some liberties when I identified this original man, but eventually they will come to know that their original self is the self that Allah created when he breathed into of his spirit and will. So yeah, I appreciate man Bashir's observation. That is really my motivation, is that we were put in a direction to discover ourselves, our pure original self. Islam is guiding us to that.
We have a comment from Brother Bashir, Roger.
This is the other Bashir. I just wanted to extend a little bit on the subject you just raised, Brother Rabanni, of the concept of original sin and how that concept shapes personality, and it shapes behavior and goes a long way in explaining much of what we're seeing in our environment today. Psychologically speaking, when you compare that with what Allah says in the Quran about the creation of the human being, that he created us and created us in excellence.
Yeah.
when you juxtapose those two concepts, born in sin and created in excellence, then you can see how personalities are developed and behaviors are shaped by those two concepts. And I just want to point that out, and how extensive that is in today's environment.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Brother Bashir. Any other questions or comments? I mean, I really would like to revisit this, Imam Rabanni, because I think that there were some points that we missed, unfortunately, because of the disruptions. But I'd like to revisit this, and so just hope you keep an open mind about that.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say, Brother Rabanni, this is I totally, wholeheartedly and enthusiastically agree with Dr. Gloria that we need to revisit this. But I think you laid a really good foundation for revisiting it. The only thing I would say is you made me think a lot about Western psychology as you were talking about Al-Kindi, and I don't remember specifically reading him, but I remember digging into the Islamic books that were around me when I was studying psychology and finding that the contrast with Western psychology, which at the time actually was just another version of Born in Sin, Freudian theories is just another version of Born in Sin. And I saw a link between what I was reading among some of the writings that were presented as Islamic psychology, that they contrasted with that, even though my understanding of al-Islam at the time was extremely rudimentary. But my understanding of the church influenced psychology was more than rudimentary. And I knew that what was being presented from an Islamic perspective was healthier than that. And people who, even the thinkers that had a positive view of human nature, were repressed in Western psychology. They pretty much ran Jung out of the room because he was presenting that positive outlook on human beings, human potential, archetypes, etc. And I'm so happy that you mentioned that perhaps Farad Muhammad had an idea, and I do think it's probably a lot of evidence that he had an idea of what our potential was. And knowing our potential as he saw it, he probably did see us growing out of it. Not saying that necessarily is the way it had to start, but he probably did visualize us growing out of it. So, we say in al-Islam, give the best construction to the matter. That's a better construction than saying he just had evil intention.
Good point. Imam Tariq, is your hand up for comment, or did I miss that it was up previously?
No, it's up. Thank you, Dr. Gloria. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Imam Rabanni. Absolutely. And I'll go ahead and be maybe the fourth or fifth person to say, we need to revisit this so that you can go into this a bit deeper. But the idea that we talk about psychology, and from the Arabic standpoint, that it had to do with growing out. I can't help but think about the connection between, we think about personality, psychology, and ethics. And the difference between how, if you have a flawed, understanding the personality, it leads into the psychology. And what manifests from that is a promotion of a particular ethical standard. And the difference between the ethics that come out of that are based in the original sin belief, and that which comes from believing that we were created in an excellent mold, with excellent potential, is vastly different. And it shapes our lives, it shapes the world that we live in. So I just feel like there's so much that can be gleaned from that. Thank you for what you were able to give and share with us today.
Alhamdulillah.
Yes, yes. My last comment really is, you know, in how intriguing it is to consider the individual personality, the collective personality, and I'm sure that there are just volumes about that, the collective personality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when does that personality begin? You know, is it in utero? Is it is any part of it related to our own DNA and what's passed down to us? You know, how much of our personality, when you think about individuals who, you know, I have a family member who wasn't, who you know, wasn't really a part of his kids' lives, and he has a son who is so much like him, and his son, and he didn't raise his son. You know, so not just mannerisms, but actual personality. So that is DNA, right? So
that has come out in the research as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So so yes, we've got to revisit this. You know, we'll talk about, you know, when it's a good time to so that you can be able to do justice by this, you know, really, really interesting topic. So
I just want to mention this one term.
Yes.
This one term that is in, see what we have a modern group of scholars studying psychology to address the problems of Muslims, period. This is not just a you know, a black problem.
Right.
And that's what knowledge, you know, when Allah says knowledge, seek refuge, the prophet says, seek refuge with Allah from knowledge that has no benefit. I think we're looking for knowledge that has some products. Products of knowledge.
Yes.
So we should use, but these modern day scholars, they know they have problems as well, right? We know that throughout the world. So they're looking at a psychology called indigenous psychology. That's what that's what topic you all just brought up. Indigenous psychology.
Yes. Yes. I think that again, the concept of psychology, you know, because it in itself is so extremely complex, and then you put personality on top of that. So
yeah, so, which is which?
Exactly.
Am I influenced by my personality, or am I influenced by my psyche?
Right. Exactly.
My thinking. Is my thinking or my behavior pattern? Yeah.
Well, actually, you know, there's a whole field of psychology that's just called personality. I mean, you can spend a lifetime just studying that field of quote unquote personality. And that's true in terms of modern psychology. And I'm sure it's true in terms of more historical figures like Al-Kindi. But what I do like about the little bit I know about him, just enough to be dangerous, is that they took a more unifying approach to knowledge, period. Whereas in this modern society, we take a divisive approach to knowledge. We try to turn every part of it into an industry, so to speak, an academic industry, when you really understand it a lot less if you don't see the interface, the integration of that with other fields of knowledge and sources of knowledge.
Yes. Yes.
And that when the early Muslim scholars were writing, the word psychology didn't exist.
Right.
So they were looking at the person. They were looking at the soul. It's more influenced from revelation then to see as a person is described, framed in coming from the prophet in revelation. Imam Tariq mentioned the nature, the fitra, that's also there as a foundation too. Yeah, which may be addressing your issue of Sister Gloria, Dr. Gloria. The person had a son. You say he had a son that's not his biological son.
No, this was his biological. He did not raise his son at all. But when you would meet the son, they had mannerisms the same, thinking the same, right?
Yeah.
But he did not raise his son. And so, no, I mean, it's really something to observe, and we know that exists everywhere, that, in all culture, You know.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I know we're going over time, but you have compelled me to think about us not being raised by our forefathers in Africa.
That's right. That's
do
right.
Do we have their traits? Do we have their, you know, maybe internal characters?
Well, and that's what I was referencing when I'm talking about this DNA, you know, that is that we carry, that you know, some of us have been blessed by and burdened by, right? You know.
Yeah.
So, all right. So thank you all so much. We did go over a little bit, but we hope to revisit this in more detail.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And Bonnie, would you like to close us out today?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Kul huwa Allahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. Wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Ameen.
Ameen. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you, Mayor Rabanni.
Well, thank you.